All right, let's dive right in. We're going to talk about a question that is so fundamental, it connects pretty much everyone, from a curious toddler to a world-changing scientist. It's one of the most important questions we ever have to face.
So how do you really know what you know? I mean, seriously, think about it. It sounds simple, right? But it's so profound. A professor once told a story about his 3-year-old son, who for a whole year would ask him this exact question like 20 times a day. And you know what? That's the question that drives all discovery. The way we answer it today is completely different from how people answered it for most of history, and that change, well, it changed everything.
You see, for the vast majority of human history, knowledge came from one place: authority. You knew something was true because, well, it was a divine revelation, or because an expert, someone like Aristotle, said so. End of story. But then, a totally new way of thinking started to bubble up, and it was built on 2 completely different pillars: experiment, what you can actually see and test for yourself, and logic, whether it makes any kind of rational sense.
The physicist Richard Feynman nailed it when he said this: "Science is the belief in the ignorance of experts." Now, what he meant was that an expert's authority just isn't good enough on its own. Real knowledge doesn't come from just taking someone's word for it. It comes from experience, from evidence. The most important question you can ever ask an expert is, okay, but how do you know? What was the experiment?
So where did this radical idea even come from? To get to the bottom of it, we need to hop in our time machine and go way back to the early 17th century. We've got to meet one of the main architects of this whole new scientific mindset, a guy named Francis Bacon.
Bacon, to put it mildly, was pretty fed up with the philosophy of his day. He argued that all this wisdom they inherited from the ancient Greeks was fantastic if you wanted to win an argument. But as he put it can talk, but it cannot generate. It was totally useless for actually building new things or making new discoveries.
So in 1620, he publishes his big masterpiece, and the cover alone was this huge, bold statement. It shows a ship sailing past the Pillars of Hercules, which to the ancient world was literally the edge of the map. The message was unmistakable. It's time to get brave, to sail right past the limits of old ideas and head out into a new world of discovery.
And right there at the bottom of the title page was this motto that just perfectly captured that new spirit: "Many will pass through and knowledge will be increased." The idea was that exploration, literally crossing oceans, but also intellectually, through experiments, was the direct path to making humanity smarter.
And Bacon's followers, they ran with this. They went on to found the Royal Society, which was one of the world's very first scientific organizations. And their motto, nullius in verba, basically means take nobody's word for it. This just cemented Bacon's whole philosophy into a single powerful command. Every claim, I don't care who makes it, has to be tested with an experiment.
Okay, so Bacon lays out the philosophical roadmap. Now let's look at a really decisive moment where this new idea got put to the test, in one of the most elegant and famous experiments in the entire history of science.
Bacon actually had a special name for this kind of thing: an experimentum crucis, or a crucial experiment. It comes from the Latin word for cross, crux, because it puts you at a crossroads between 2 competing ideas. It's an experiment that is specifically designed to force a decision, to point you down one path and prove the other one is a total dead end.
And this is exactly what Isaac Newton did. The big debate at the time was this: do prisms create colors, or do they just separate the colors that are already hiding inside white light? His experiment was just genius in its simplicity. So first, he passed white light through one prism, and poof, you'd had a rainbow. Then he used a screen to block out everything except for one single color, let's say red. Then he took that beam of pure red light and passed it through a second prism.
And the result? It was absolutely decisive. The second prism bent the red light, sure, but the light stayed red. It didn't split again, it didn't change color. And that simple, beautiful test proved it once and for all. The prism wasn't making the color, it was just separating out a property that was already a part of the light itself. Case closed.
But here's the thing. This whole scientific mindset isn't just for super geniuses like Isaac Newton. It's actually a way of thinking that's available to anybody, as long as you've got enough curiosity and, well, humility. And the story of one very surprising historical figure shows us exactly how.
Let me introduce you to Samuel Pepys. Now, this guy was the top administrator for the entire British Royal Navy. We're talking a massive, complex job. And yet, at 29 years old, this brilliant man admitted something pretty astonishing. He didn't know his multiplication table. So what did he do about it? He hired a tutor. And his famous diary shows us that he took it incredibly seriously. On July 9th, he wrote that he was up by 4 o'clock and at my multiplication table hard. And then just 2 days later, he writes that he's now almost master of. The man was motivated, and he really put in the hours.
So fast forward a few years, Pepys actually becomes the president of the Royal Society. And he runs into this really tricky probability problem involving dice. So who does he write to for help? None other than Isaac Newton. Newton, of course, sends him back the right answer, but for Pepys, that wasn't good enough. He didn't just want the answer. He needed to understand the how, the method behind it.
So he writes back to Newton with this absolutely beautiful line, "I cannot bear the thought of being made master of a jewel I know not how to wear." Just wow, what an incredible way to say it. An answer without the understanding behind it is like being given a precious jewel that you have no idea how to use. It's basically worthless. He was insisting on genuine understanding.
And this is where we get to a really powerful contrast. You have Pepys, who was totally willing to admit his ignorance to one of the smartest people alive, because his desire to learn was just so much stronger than his pride. Now compare that to a comment from a modern student. "I never went for help because I felt like he would make me feel stupid." Pepys teaches us that the fear of looking stupid is probably the single biggest enemy of true understanding.
So in the end, the big lesson from Bacon and Newton and Samuel Pepys is that this whole scientific mindset, it's not some magic power reserved for geniuses. It's a set of skills that any of us can learn. Be driven by curiosity. Be diligent. Don't be ashamed to say, "I don't know." Be willing to swallow your pride and ask for help. And maybe most important of all, insist on genuinely understanding, not just memorizing facts.
And that leaves us with one last question to chew on, inspired by Pepys himself. Think about your own life, your work, your hobbies. What's some piece of knowledge you have, some answer you're holding on to, without really understanding how it works? What jewel are you holding that you don't yet know how to wear?